Good? Because it's, yeah, first of all, you have to trying to establish friendship with him.
Oh, that helps.
Yeah.
That's cheating, but that's okay. Sure.
That's it.
Please. I know. How many times do you have to do this? How many visitors did you have?
100.
This is my video update from Athens, Greece on this Wednesday midday, September 6th. September the 6th. Wow. So let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with an announcement from Russia and Saudi Arabia that they will be cutting the production of oil at least until December 2023. And this sent the price of oil shooting way up. I believe crude oil hit $90 a barrel. I think it was at that point. The last time it was at that point was, I think, November 2021. But I'm not quite sure. Anyway, it's been a while since oil has been at $90 a barrel. But there you have it. Russia and Saudi Arabia saying that they're going to cut down on production, increase the price of oil. And this definitely is above the Russian oil price cap. So what happens now? Nothing. Nothing happens because the oil price cap is a complete failure. And you know, Biden, in order to keep the price of oil suppressed during the midterms, he started to release oil from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserves. And that didn't last long. So the U.S.'s Strategic Petroleum Reserves, I think they're at an all-time low, or like a 40-year low. And it didn't accomplish the goal that Biden was hoping for, which was to keep the price of oil down for a significant amount of time, because all Russia and Saudi Arabia had to do was just cut production, and the price goes right back up and it passes this $60 Russian oil price cap. And the G7, the collective West, they can't enforce this price cap. They will not enforce this price cap. They will just look away and they will accept it. They will accept that the oil price cap has failed, and the collective West media is just not going to talk about it. They're not going to mention it at all. That the once heralded, the once talked about, much talked about oil price cap that will bring Russia's economy to its knees and further diminish Putin's war machine. Well, that's not happening. So Russia and Saudi Arabia working together, flexing their commodity oil production muscles, and there you have it. I think it's $90 a barrel for Brent crude. So that is the first U.S. sanctions, collective West sanctions, economic fail. And you know, Saudi Arabia was totally in on this because they were very pissed off when the G7 decided to put a price cap on oil. You know that Saudi Arabia was like, yeah, you're going to put a price cap on Russian oil today. Tomorrow you're going to put a price cap on Saudi oil. And listen up, collective West G7. We're the ones that decide the price of oil, not you guys. So I'm sure that when Putin called MBS and they talked about this oil production cut, MBS was like, hell yeah. He's like, I'm in. I am in. Let's send a message to the G7. So we have another economic sanctions fail, and this one has to do with China. And chips, more microchips, more washing machine chips. No, not with China. China isn't having to go into their washing machines to take out the chips because China is producing chips, and it looks like they have managed to produce quite a good chip for a Huawei mobile phone. And this is a big story. This really is a big story, and once again, it showcases the failure of collective West sanctions. In this instance, sanctions directed at China in order to stop Chinese technological advances, and it failed. That was the purpose of the U.S. Putting China on the sanctions escalator to try and stop their technological production and their technological advances, because they decided to hold back microchip, semiconductor chip technology, and they thought that this would hold China back, and it didn't, because China just said, you know what, we'll just do everything in-house. We'll make our own microchips, and that is exactly what China did. Let me read you a post here, a Twitter post. This was retweeted by Brian Berletic, and it is from the account of Arnaud Bertrand, and I think he explains what is going on here with this Huawei 7nm chip that was created in China. The more I think about it, the more I realize how huge this news actually is, how big a win it is for China, and how big a loss for the US. In one simple move, China basically proved that the enormous years-long efforts the US put to destroy both Huawei and the Chinese semiconductor industry have been defeated. People had to look inside the phone to find out it is equipped with Huawei's in-house Kirin 9000 processor, which is apparently made by Chinese semiconductor firm SMIC, using a second-generation 7nm class fabrication process. Less than 1 year ago, when the U.S. introduced its sweeping set of sanctions against the Chinese semiconductors industry, experts vowed it would kill the industry, or at least freeze its technological progress at the 28nm chips China were at back then. Fast forward to now, China can evidently mass produce second generation 7nm chips entirely indigenously. The iPhone 14 Pro has 4nm chips, so China is now almost on par, maybe just 1 or 2 years behind, but catching up at an insane speed. So what has the US managed to do? They transformed Huawei into an incredibly more resilient company, and have made China build an entirely indigenous semiconductor ecosystem, which wasn't the case at all before the sanctions, and which I am sure will prove to be a formidable competitor to other semiconductor companies out there. Because other countries have been paying attention here, they now know that it's super dangerous to source semiconductors. What is going on? I don't know what's going on, to be quite honest. I have no idea. I think the dog there was chasing a cat, and then the kid started crying. I don't know. Anyway, where was I? I'm sure the comment section is going to be very upset with me now. Anyway, what was I saying? Let me pick up from this part. So what has the U.S. managed to do? They've transformed Huawei into an incredibly more resilient company, and have made China build an entirely indigenous semiconductors ecosystem, which wasn't the case at all before the sanctions, and which I am sure will prove to be a formidable competitor to other semiconductor companies out there. Because other companies, this is a key part, because other companies have been paying attention here. They now know that it's super dangerous to source semiconductors with Western firms, as the US won't hesitate to weaponize the industry for geopolitical ends. So they'll turn to Chinese firms. So it's lose, lose, lose for the US. Much more lose than if they hadn't done any of their aggressive actions against Huawei or China's chip sector, which again goes to show just how utterly pointless this new Cold War is. Had the US decided to remain in engagement mode instead of extreme competition mode, as they call it, they'd have been much better off. In one word, hubris. So, I read this from the Twitter account of Arnaud Bertrand. And everything that he's saying here with regards to China and their semiconductor industries and the sanctions that the collective West placed on China in order to stop their technological advances, and what China did to bypass those sanctions, everything that he's saying here, everything that he's describing here, just copy and paste it, and you can just say the same thing about what the collective West tried to do to Russia. It's like the same exact thing. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work with countries the size of China and the size of Russia, with China's production capabilities and their industry and their population and their economic power, and with a country like Russia and its immense wealth in natural resources and commodities, as well as Russia's size as a country. So none of these things that the collective West set out to do, sanctions against Russia, sanctions against China, none of it is working. It's actually having the reverse effect. It's making China and Russia stronger. And when you go to the comments, the replies to this Twitter post, there's a whole bunch of coping going on. A whole bunch of people are saying that this is just a one-off, that the Chinese chips are not going to be that good, that Chinese semiconductor industry is still going to be dependent on the collective West. And you just read a whole lot of coping. And, all I have to say to that is I was in Moscow, I was in St. Petersburg, and I saw the Chinese cars that were there. 1 out of every 2 cars was a Chinese car. It wasn't like that 4 years ago when I was last in Russia. It wasn't like that at all. There were no Chinese cars. And in 3 years' time, 50% of the cars in Moscow and in St. Petersburg seemed to be Chinese cars. And when I would talk to the taxi drivers, I tried my best to speak to them in Russian and talk to them about the Chinese cars that they're driving. And I wanted to get their thoughts on how they saw the cars. They were all like, these cars are great, no problem, all good. So, there's a lot of coping going on, but I think sooner or later, in 2, 3, 4 years' time, China's going to have a very capable and possibly thriving semiconductor industry, and it's all going to be done in China. And the most important part to this tweet is where he said that other countries around the world, they're going to be so freaked out with the collective West and the way they weaponize sanctions that when they want chips, they're going to choose China because it's going to be a safer bet. Anyway, I think that's a big story. I think that's a really, really big story. So now let's shift gears and talk about Ukraine again. Talk about Ukraine again. And let's start things off with an article from The Economist. And the title of this article is Inside Ukraine's Assassination Program. And this article is quite a disturbing article from The Economist. It says here underneath the title, its agents have become experts in dark revenge, but some worry a clear strategy is absent. So this article talks about how Ukraine, the SBU, and other agencies in Ukraine, they have a pretty robust, pretty active assassination program going on, and this program is not something that was started because of the conflict in Ukraine or the special military operation from a year and a half ago. This program actually started, or really started to gain momentum, in 2015 after the events of the Maidan coup. Now, this is a very disturbing, very disgusting article because it seems like The Economist is kind of cheering this on. It seems like they're kind of proud at the fact that Ukraine has an assassination program. And in this article, they talk about how the assassination program targets strategic targets, like it targets people of what they consider to be strategic military value, but they also target people who they consider serve no military or strategic purpose, just everyday civilians, celebrities, politicians, journalists who by assassinating them really don't further along Ukraine's military goals or their geopolitical goals. But the article says that this assassination program and these three-letter agencies like the SBU, they assassinate these people in order to impress the president and in order to gain media and PR points. That's actually what the article says. And some of the strategic military targets that this article talks about date way back to post Maidan and after the conflict with Donbass in 2015-16, and they talk about how this assassination program killed people like Givy and Motorola, people that followed the conflict in the Donbass in East Ukraine in 2015 and 16. They'll recognize those names, and this article talks about how this program assassinated them. And then the article also talks about how the program assassinated people who serve no real military strategic purpose, like Daria Dugina. And it also says that this assassination program is active in Ukraine, but also very active inside of Russia as well. This was a really hard article to read. This was a very disgusting article, and it made it very difficult to read because The Economist wasn't criticizing this program. It was actually cheering it on. It actually seemed like it was very, very proud of the fact that Ukraine is doing this, is conducting these assassinations. So yeah, this is the Zelensky regime. This is Ukraine. This is connected to the special military operation, but it goes much further back than that. And I wonder what Western three-letter agencies helped Ukraine build this assassination program in 2015. I wonder what three-letter agencies assisted the three-letter agencies in Ukraine to operate this assassination program. But a very disturbing article. This is the flourishing democracy, the human rights democracy, EU Western values known as Ukraine. It's all represented here in this article from The Economist. The fact that they're even putting out an article like this, I think, just says it all. The fact that they're actually publishing this, I mean, it's pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible read, a very difficult read, but it's amazing that they're just coming out with this information. They're just posting and publishing this for everyone to read, and they're pretty proud about it, it seems. Anyway, so sticking with Ukraine, we have U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken visiting Kiev today. He is going to announce, it's been confirmed, $1 billion in aid to the Zelensky regime. Of course, you can't travel to Kiev without bringing a briefcase full of money. So that is what Blinken is going to announce. $1 billion, just like that, $1 billion to Kiev. And I wonder what else Blinken's going to talk about with Zelensky and Zelensky's production team. I wonder what they are going to discuss. I'm sure they're going to discuss the failed counteroffensive. I'm sure they're going to discuss the firing of Reznikov and how they are going to pin all the blame of the failed counteroffensive on Reznikov, while scapegoating him as a defense minister who was deeply corrupt and managed to squander 100 or 150 billion in collective West aid. Reznikov is going to be the man who will be scapegoated as the guy that blew all this money, and no one's going to know where it went to, but it's all going to be Reznikov's fault. I'm sure that's what they're going to plan as well. And of course, they're going to talk about the new strategy post big super duper counteroffensive. I'm sure they're going to talk about that as well, whatever that new strategy is going to be. But yeah, I'm curious to see what the readouts, what the statements are going to be from Blinken and Zelensky post meeting, if they give any statements or talk to the press. But we do know $1 billion right away to Zelensky. That's the fee to travel to Kiev and meet Zelensky. $1 billion. Of course, it's like Blinken is paying himself, to be quite honest. He's giving $1 billion to Zelensky, but all these guys are going to get back $990 million. So, Zelensky will keep the 10 million. He'll keep 10 million so he can buy a home in Florida. Anyway, that's the meeting with Blinken in Kiev. We don't have any more information as to what's going to be going down there, what they're going to talk about, but I imagine that's what they're going to discuss. And the U.S. has NATO, the collective West, the Pentagon. They've been pressing the Zelensky regime to put all of its military might in the direction of Zaporozhye and the south in order to reach the Sea of Azov before Zelensky gets to the UN, before he arrives in New York to give his big speech at the United Nations. They would like Zelensky to show significant progress in the south in the direction of Melitopol. But the latest updates that I have is that, first off, Zelensky, from what I understand, made a trip to Artemovsk, formerly known as Bakhmut. So he made a trip to the front lines there, which I imagine is going to really upset the Pentagon and NATO, because, as Alexander said in his video update yesterday, it seems like this is the Zelensky regime's way of telling the collective West, we know that you want us to move all our resources in the south direction, but we're still invested in the Bakhmut narrative. And I imagine that the Pentagon is not going to be happy with the symbolism behind Zelensky's trip to the front lines in Artemovsk, Bakhmut. But there is a lot of fighting in the direction of Bakhmut, in the Kleshchevka region, the Kleshchevka village, and Ukraine is desperately trying to take this area. I believe if they take this area, it gives them an opportunity to attack Bakhmut, Artemovsk from the south, but they're throwing a whole lot of resources in this direction to try and capture this area, this village. And once again, they're suffering catastrophic losses. Bakhmut, they just can't get it out of their heads. Bakhmut, Artemovsk. But in the Rabotyne area, in that direction, which is where the Pentagon wants the Ukraine military to dedicate all of its resources towards, the news is mixed, I guess. It's kind of a fog of war situation. Once again, we're getting more mainstream media posts saying that Ukraine has breached the first line of Russian defense in Rabotyne, Verbove direction, and they're now moving towards the second line of defense. I saw a whole bunch of articles this morning with that exact narrative and that exact title. But from the Russian side of things, there is still fighting going on in Rabatinho. I have read some Telegram and Twitter reports. I can't confirm it 100%, which say that that Russia has allowed Ukraine to basically capture most of this village, and the Russian military is now on the high ground, and they're striking, they're hitting at the Ukraine military in the area of Rabotinya. And I've also read analysis which claims that the Ukraine military, because they don't see any possibility of moving further south, at least in a straight line through Rabotinya, they have actually moved many of their resources to a completely different direction, in the direction of Ugledar. So, you know, it's hard to get a good understanding as to what is happening. If you go to the collective west side of things, it looks like Ukraine is moving very quickly towards the second line of Russian defenses, and within a week or two, they'll be on their way to Tokmak, and then from Tokmak, you say Melitopol, and then from Melitopol, you can say Sivasov, and you could put together that narrative before Zelensky goes to New York. But if you look at the reports coming out from the Russian side of things, or from various other analysts, fighting is still taking place in this Rabotinya-Verbove region, and the Ukraine military is just getting hammered, and they've actually had to take resources and divert them towards a different direction. So we'll see in the next couple of days exactly what's going to happen. As I've said in many videos in the past, I wouldn't be shocked if Ukraine eventually captures this village of Rabotinya, but how they're going to hold on to it and what happens after that, I think, is a whole different story. So maybe in the next couple of weeks, my thoughts are that in the next couple of weeks, before Zelensky gets to the United States, maybe Ukraine can say that they've now captured the entire village of Rabotinya, and then the collective West mainstream media, they'll spin this as a huge victory, and that'll be enough. Perhaps that'll be enough for Zelensky's big speech in the United States. But who knows? Who knows? After they capture Rabotinya, I imagine the Russian military is going to come down on the Ukraine military very, very hard. Anyway, we also had the Russian military hit the port of Odessa again, the ports which are close to the borders of Romania, and the ports that allegedly were carrying grain, but quite possibly were smuggling in weapons. Or if you go by Annalena 360's account, the ports that had 4 million tons of Ukraine coca grain, cocaine grain, if you go by Annalena Baerbock's comments from yesterday. Anyway, the Russians, they hit that port again today, or yesterday evening. And finally, before we get to our clown world, we have the Putin-Kim Jong-un meeting that might take place. I don't think this is quite confirmed just yet, but it looks like the Russian president will meet the leader of North Korea, and the collective West mainstream media is saying that this is all about a weapons deal. Russia is running out of weapons, and they need North Korea to supply those weapons, or else the Russian military will collapse, because its military, its weapons are depleted. That is the collective Western narrative. And Jake Sullivan, when he was speaking about this potential meeting between Russia and North Korea, he blew a gasket. He lost control, and he's very upset at this meeting taking place. He said that providing weapons to Russia to use on the battlefield to attack grain ships and infrastructure in many cities in an attempt to conquer territory that belongs to another sovereign state will negatively affect North Korea, and they will pay for it. How much more can North Korea pay for it? I mean, they're already under an immense amount of sanctions. They've already been isolated to a point where you can't be isolated anymore from the collective West and from the collective West institutions and architecture. How much more can North Korea be made to suffer? What exactly are you going to sanction North Korea with? And what does the collective West care if Russia buys weapons from North Korea? If they get a good price for them, what's the problem? I don't see a problem in any of this. You have 50 countries in the collective West supplying Ukraine with God knows how many weapons. A lot of it is donated. A lot of those weapons are for free. A lot of those weapons are on loan. But whatever the case, 50 countries are demilitarizing themselves and giving weapons to Ukraine. So if Russia wants to do business with North Korea, what does the U.S. care? Why should the U.S. care? They've sanctioned North Korea and made an enemy of North Korea. They've sanctioned Russia and made an enemy of Russia. And they're fighting a proxy war with Russia. Some would say that they're kind of fighting a proxy conflict with North Korea as well. So, I think it's a pretty natural outcome, a pretty predictable outcome that Russia and North Korea would do business in one form or another. And what if the reverse is the case? What if it's not North Korea supplying weapons to Russia, but what if it's the opposite? What if the deal is that Russia provides weapons and maybe missile technology, maybe hypersonic missile technology to North Korea? What if that's the real thing that's going on here? Possibly. South Korea hasn't been too kind to Russia through this conflict. South Korea has supplied a whole bunch of ammunition and weapons to the Zelensky regime. So why wouldn't Russia do business with North Korea? And maybe it's not North Korea providing Russia with weapons. Maybe it's Russia providing North Korea with weapons and military know-how, possibly. But either way, two sovereign countries that the collective West has sanctioned and made an enemy of course they're going to get together and do business. It's pretty predictable, I would say. Anyway, let's do a clown world, and we will wrap this video up. And this clown world is once again about, well, not once again. This is about the Challenger 2 tank story. I say once again because I talked about the Challenger 2 tanks yesterday. The Challenger 2 tank that was destroyed in the front lines yesterday, and we have the Russian embassy in the UK trolling the British Ministry of Defense, and they put out a tweet with the title "Wasted," and they have an image of a Challenger 2 tank. They have the flags of the UK and of Ukraine. And underneath this image of this burning Challenger tank, it reads, "Cost to taxpayers £4.2 million." That's the troll from the Russian embassy in the UK towards the British Ministry of Defense. And by the way, the British Ministry of Defense, they have confirmed that the Challenger 2 tank was indeed destroyed. They said that none of the crew members were hurt. This is what the British Ministry of Defense says. The crew members survived, but the tank has been destroyed. I've actually read reports saying that the tank is still burning. It's been burning now for like 24 hours. And what else? Oh, the British Ministry of Defense, they said that they're not going to send a replacement Challenger tank to Ukraine. So it looks like whatever tanks Ukraine has received from the UK, that's it. There will be no replacement Challenger 2 tank. Anyway, that is the video, everybody. theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, kind of. We're kind of on Rumble. ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and absolutely go to theduran.locals.com. anything were to ever happen to any of the Duran channels, that's the first place you go to, theduran.locals.com. It's free to join. All our content goes on there. If you want to support this channel, that's also very cool. And what else? And we are on Twitter. Alexander's on Twitter. The Duran is on Twitter. I'm now on Twitter, though I have not sent a tweet out yet. I don't know. What should my first tweet be? I don't even know. I'm not good at this social media stuff. Anyway, we'll see. But look for me on Twitter as well. And the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code Good Day. Take care. Oh, another broken bench, I see. Greece has got to fix its benches. Look at this. Take care.